Olivia and I had only been married for 2 months, yet her prenatal report stated in plain black and white that she was 22 weeks pregnant, which was well over 5 months. This was more than just a case of infidelity. It was a massive, high-stakes fraud worth billions of dollars. She intended to infiltrate the Hayes family while carrying her ex's child, waiting until the birth to orchestrate an accident that would eliminate me and allow her to seize my grandfather's entire legacy. In that instant, I shredded the bailout check I had written to rescue her father's failing business. Since she took me for a fool who would raise another man's child, I was going to show her exactly how ruthless the heir to the Hayes empire could be when pushed to the brink. The ultrasound report had slipped from a stack of documents on my desk and now lay exposed under the lamp. The cold, clinical black and white image seemed to drain the very color from my face. I had felt a brief surge of excitement, but the date on the report was undeniable. The gestational age was listed at 22 weeks. My marriage to Olivia Miller was nothing more than a strategic alliance, a cold merger between two powerful families. We had only been husband and wife for 2 months. If the Miller family thought they could breach our agreement, they were about to face the devastating consequences. Once I finished signing the final bailout documents for the Miller Group, I opened the top drawer of my mahogany desk to find something to take the edge off. A Patek Philippe shimmered next to a Richard Mille 001, while a collection of keys to my luxury fleet sat in the corner. My gold lighter was nowhere to be found. I frowned as I sifted through a mountain of contracts. My eyes caught on a laminated sheet tucked away inside the Miller Group portfolio. My entire body went rigid and my eyes widened in disbelief. It was an ultrasound report. The name printed at the top was my wife of 2 months, Olivia Miller. The gestational age was 22 weeks, which is over 5 months. I had only known her for 3 months, and we had only been married for 2. A hot surge of blood rushed to my head. My fingers clenched, crinkling the smooth plastic of the report. Olivia, I snarled to the empty office, you really take me for a goddamn fool. I snatched my phone and dialed my assistant, Leo. Leo, I need everything you can find on Olivia Miller from the last 6 months. I want to know every place she has been and every person she has had contact with, and I want it on my desk in 30 minutes. I paused, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. Pull all her financial records and freeze every single one of her cards. A cold fire burned in my eyes as I added that I wanted the bailout package for the Miller Group terminated immediately. Cancel every joint venture we have with them. I want every cent of our funding clawed back. Pull all of our personnel out of their offices and have them back at Hayes Enterprises by tomorrow morning. Olivia, if you want to play with fire, I will burn your entire world to the ground. On the other end of the line, Leo was silent for a moment as he processed the rapid-fire orders. Right away, Mr. Hayes, he replied, his voice back to its usual professional efficiency. The ultrasound report lay on my desk as if it were mocking me. 22 weeks, the words felt like a sick joke. Only 2 months ago, the Miller Group had been on the brink of total collapse with its supply chain in absolute tatters. Olivia's father, Stephen Miller, had come to my grandfather practically begging for help. He offered up his daughter for a marriage alliance just to secure a lifeline from Hayes Enterprises. After the wedding, our life had been defined by a polite, sterile distance. On the surface, she was respectful and the perfect corporate wife. There had been no scandals and no drama until now. And now I find this. She was carrying another man's child while planning to pass it off as mine to secure an heir to the Hayes fortune. My rage crested again as I stabbed at my phone to dial our head of legal. Olivia Miller, check the infidelity clause. I want a divorce agreement drafted that leaves her with absolutely nothing but the clothes on her back. I want it on my desk tonight. Yes, Mr. Hayes, the lawyer replied right away. I lit a cigarette and watched the smoke curl into the still air of my office. My expression was like a thundercloud, dark and ready to break. Exactly 30 minutes later, there was a sharp rap on my office door. Come in, I called out. Leo entered the room, carrying a thick file. He sat across from me and pulled out a few key pages, placing them directly in front of me. Sir, he began with a grave tone, we had the preliminary report. The pregnancy was confirmed 3 months ago. She has been getting regular checkups at Lakeside Private, which happens to be one of our subsidiary hospitals. Her attending physician is a Dr. Lawson. According to the results of the last scan, she is having a boy. I let out a short, cold, and entirely humorless laugh. A boy. They were really trying to set the hook as deep as possible. Since the wedding, Olivia had kept a remarkably low profile, moving only between our home, a few charity events, and her office. There has been no contact with any other men of note except for a new executive assistant she recently hired. His name is Caleb Vance, and he occasionally drives her home after work. Leo wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead as he continued. The only person of interest is this Caleb Vance. Our records indicate that he and Olivia were classmates together back at Northwestern. I waved a dismissive hand to cut him off. Stop the investigation. Just find Caleb Vance and bring him to me. If I couldn't see what was right in front of my face, I had no business running a multi-billion-dollar empire. I pulled out my phone and dialed Olivia's number. Her voice was laced with honey when she answered. Lucas, honey, I'm at the office right now. I don't have any meetings this afternoon, so I was thinking of coming home early to make you dinner. I have a surprise for you. A surprise. If I hadn't found that report, her little surprise might have actually worked on me. My parents died years ago, leaving me as the very last of the direct Hayes bloodline. When her father first proposed a marriage, my grandfather agreed instantly because he was so eager for a great-grandchild. If she had announced this pregnancy to him, the old man would have likely signed over a massive chunk of the company to his future great-grandson on the spot. I ended the call without saying another word. Get my security detail. I want 10 men, and get me Rhino. Leo flinched at the mention of the name. Rhino was an ex-Special Forces operator with a dark past in the world of private mercenaries. The number of men he had put in the ground was well into the double digits. Whenever Rhino was called in, blood was inevitably spilled. Hayes Enterprises had pulled him out of a black site prison, and in return, he served me with absolute, unwavering loyalty. This time I wanted blood. I added one more thing, telling Leo to get a DNA testing team from Lakeside. I told him to have them meet me at the Miller Group Tower because we were going to perform a paternity test on site. I slid into the back of my Rolls-Royce. Behind me, a convoy of black SUVs filled with my security detail pulled into formation. Once inside the car, I lit another cigarette to steady my nerves. Leo passed me his tablet, showing a photo of Caleb Vance on the screen. He was handsome in a soft, boyish way. I knew that face wouldn't be looking handsome for much longer. My phone buzzed relentlessly with a dozen missed calls from Stephen Miller. He must have received the news about the terminated bailout. Then, a call from Olivia flashed on the screen. This time, I chose to answer. Her voice was soft and laced with a delicate, faked confusion. Lucas, what happened? My American Express card was just declined, she said. I chuckled, a low and cruel sound. Why do you still need my money to pay for another man's child? There was a loud clatter on the other end, the unmistakable sound of her phone hitting the floor. A moment later, she snatched it back up, her voice now ragged and strained. Lucas, what on earth are you talking about? I hung up the phone without answering. The motorcade swept into the underground garage of the Miller Group Tower. The old security guard recognized the Hayes Enterprises insignia on the Rolls-Royce and raised the barrier immediately. The team from Lakeside was already there, a line of white-coated technicians waiting nervously for my arrival. As I stepped out of the car, they all bowed their heads in unison and greeted me. I gave a curt nod and took the private elevator to the top floor, heading straight for Olivia and Stephen Miller's executive offices. I found them pacing the room like caged animals. Olivia, what in God's name is going on? Stephen Miller was frantic. Lucas just pulled the plug on everything. We were just starting to turn things around, but we can't even make payroll next month without the Hayes funding. Olivia's face was deathly pale with fear. The words were on the tip of her tongue, but she swallowed them back. I don't know, she stammered. Stephen ran a hand through his thinning hair and asked if she had done something to piss me off. He paused as a thought began to dawn on him. It's that new assistant. I told you not to hire that Caleb kid. What man wants his wife running around with a handsome young assistant all day? Olivia's face went even whiter as she insisted it had nothing to do with Caleb. Just then, the office door exploded inward, having been kicked clean off its hinges. The solid mahogany panel flew across the room and crashed against the far wall. "No connection," I said, stepping through the ruined doorway with my face set in a mask of cold fury. "We'll see about that." My security detail fanned out behind me, filling the opulent office until the room felt small and cramped. Stephen Miller broke out in a cold sweat, forcing a sickly smile as he scurried forward. "Lucas, my boy, you're finally here," he chirped. I sneered and told the old man not to call me that, adding that I wouldn't be caught dead as his son-in-law. His smile froze and shattered instantly. "Lucas, what is this all about, and why have you brought all these men?" My gaze was like ice as I pointed a finger at Olivia. "Why don't you ask her?" Olivia was trembling, her eyes darting everywhere except at my face, though she still managed to lift her chin defiantly. I don't know what you're talking about," she lied. A sharp and bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Are you still playing dumb?" I was in no mood for games. I closed the distance between us, grabbing her chin and forcing her to look me in the eye. Then I drew my hand back and slapped her hard across the face. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The sound of the slap echoed through the stunned silence. Olivia stared at me, with her cheek flaming red and a look of pure shock on her face. Stephen remained frozen nearby, his mouth hanging agape. "You're carrying Caleb Vance's child behind my back and trying to pass him off as a Hayes heir." I threw the ultrasound report directly at her face. It fluttered through the air and landed on the floor at her feet. The last trace of color drained from Olivia's face, yet she was still desperately scrambling to fabricate a lie. "Lucas, you're mistaken," she stammered. "That isn't my report. There are thousands of women named Olivia Miller in the world. How can you be so sure it's mine?" I watched her pathetic performance with a cold smile touching my lips. Then I drove my foot into her stomach, sending her crumpling to the ground. Before she could even recover, I grabbed a handful of her hair and dragged her like a sack of garbage into the adjoining conference room. "You want proof? I'll give you the goddamn proof. Get in here," I barked to the medical team. "I want an amniocentesis performed right now. I want the DNA results within the hour." Olivia finally broke down. The performance was over, and raw terror took its place. "No," she shrieked, struggling frantically against my grip. "No, an amniocentesis can hurt the baby. Lucas, I'm begging you, please don't do this." A cold smile spread across my face as I noted that she had finally admitted it. Two burly nurses grabbed her and hauled her onto a chair while she kicked and screamed in protest. Her slight frame was no match for their strength. "The patient is agitated," the doctor said calmly as he prepared to administer a sedative. He produced a long syringe. Olivia's struggles only intensified as she screamed that I was killing our child. "I'll never forgive you," she shrieked. "You'll rot in hell for this. Lucas, you'll—" As the sedative slowly entered her bloodstream, her screams subsided into ragged, broken sobs. Her body eventually went limp, but her eyes remained wide and red, burning with a furious and helpless hatred. The doctor began the procedure with swift and professional movements. I stepped out of the room and lit another cigarette, the tip glowing like a demon's eye in the dim hallway. Olivia was dealt with for now. It was time for Stephen Miller's turn. There was no way the old fox didn't know about this. A 5-month pregnancy is nearly impossible to hide. The security guard from the lobby heard the commotion and cautiously pushed the door open. He took one look at the room, full of stone-faced men in dark suits, all turning to stare at him, and wisely decided to back away, pulling the door shut behind him. For a $2,000 a month salary, he wasn't about to die a hero. "Have a seat," I said, kicking a chair towards Stephen. "Don't ever say I didn't show you any courtesy." Rhino immediately stepped forward and placed a heavy hand on the old man's shoulder, forcing him down into the chair. "Old man, you have exactly one chance to give me a plausible explanation," I said, my voice dropping dangerously low. "Otherwise, I will make sure the Miller Group vanishes from Chicago within 3 days." A tremor ran through Stephen's body. He was still clutching the ultrasound report, his face a mask of pure misery. "Lucas, I swear. I only just found out about this myself, he whimpered. You have my word that if Olivia is at fault, I will not spare her. I swear to you, that child will never see the light of day. He spoke with a desperate and furious conviction because he had no other choice. Rhino was standing right beside him with his jacket bulging in a way that suggested either a gun or a very large knife. Stephen knew that a single wrong word would get him killed right here in his own office. Lucas, I'm begging you, for the sake of the history between our families and the friendship you have with my grandfather, give me a chance to make this right. I will personally find Caleb Vance and deliver him to you. His face was a canvas of pure desperation. In his heart, he was already imagining the 1,000 cuts he wanted to inflict on Olivia and her lover. I stared at him with my face set like a granite mask. Fine, I'll give you that chance. But if that little tramp tries to give birth to that bastard and tarnish the Hayes name, you won't mind if I dump your entire family into Lake Michigan to feed the fish, will you? A fresh wave of cold sweat broke out on Stephen's brow. He nodded frantically. Of course, Lucas, he stammered. But if this is all a misunderstanding, you must apologize to me and Olivia, and you must increase your investment in the Miller Group. The old bastard actually still thought he could salvage this situation. I let out a short, sharp laugh. There is no misunderstanding, I told him. 2 hours later, the doctor emerged with a grim expression on his face. He held a single sheet of paper. Mr. Hayes, the results are conclusive, he said. The fetus's DNA is not a match for yours. My company kept my DNA profile on file as a standard requirement for the executive board. Stephen Miller's heart sank, and his already pale face turned completely ashen. The last glimmer of hope was officially extinguished. I glanced through the window at Olivia, who was now sleeping peacefully under the influence of the sedative. A wave of pure disgust washed over me. A dark and violent impulse rose in my throat, an urge to personally drag her to the lakefront and hold her under the icy water. Take her to Lakeside Private, I ordered. Terminate the pregnancy immediately. I turned to Stephen and told him he was going with her. Don't even think about trying anything, I warned. Stephen's hair seemed to turn a shade grayer in that very moment. He nodded, completely defeated. An ambulance soon arrived to take Olivia away. As it pulled out, my phone rang. It was Leo. Mr. Hayes, we got Caleb Vance, he reported. I asked where he was. He was trying to get out of the city, Leo replied. We had to ram his car to stop him, and we wrecked 2 of our SUVs in the process. He was quick to run, but in my city, there was nowhere to hide. Take him to that abandoned Miller factory on the south side. And Leo, find out everything you can about his family. Right away, sir, he answered. 30 minutes later, my car pulled up to the derelict factory. It was a failed project of the Miller Group, left to rot after their funding had dried up. Inside the cavernous, echoing space, Caleb Vance was hanging from a steel beam by his wrists. A dirty rag was stuffed into his mouth, and a trickle of blood ran down his temple. The moment he saw me, his eyes widened in terror, and he began to struggle against his bonds. Muffled shouts escaped from behind the gag. Cut him down, I commanded. Rhino sliced the rope and pulled the rag from Caleb's mouth. As his feet touched the concrete floor, I looked at his handsome face, and a fresh surge of rage boiled up inside me. Before he could utter a single word, I lashed out. My foot connected squarely with his chest. He doubled over, gasping for air. I kicked him again and again, more than a dozen times, until my Italian leather shoe was scuffed and misshapen. His pretty face was now a swollen, bruised mess with the perfect imprint of a size 11 sole stamped across it from forehead to chin. My foot was starting to ache. It was time to let someone else take over. I gave Rhino a look and told him to break his legs. Rhino cracked his knuckles and moved toward Caleb. Caleb, who had been feigning unconsciousness, snapped his eyes open. Mr. Hayes, what did I do? This is kidnapping. This is illegal. Is there no law in this country? He cried. The law, I scoffed. In this room, I am the law. Did you not think about the consequences when you were sleeping with my wife? Caleb's face paled, but he held firm, claiming he didn't know what I was talking about. I sat back and gestured to Rhino to proceed. Tough guy. Let's see how tough he really is. Beat him until he talks. One of my men brought over a rusty metal chair for me. I settled into the chair and lit a cigarette. Rhino's eyes went cold as he delivered a single, brutal kick to Caleb's shin. A sickening crack echoed through the factory. Caleb let out a scream like a slaughtered pig. Rhino, methodical as ever, stepped on Caleb's other leg. He put his full weight on it until it too snapped. Caleb's screams grew louder, but through the pain, he still refused to confess. "Rhino," I said calmly, "shut him up." Rhino drew back his hand, which was as large as a dinner plate, and slapped Caleb across the face. Caleb screamed as two bloody teeth flew from his mouth. "Are you going to talk?" Slap. Talk. Slap. After a dozen more slaps, Caleb's face was an unrecognizable, swollen pulp. "Lucas Hayes," he coughed while spitting blood, "you might as well just kill me." He tried to push himself up against a pillar, but his broken legs were useless. They were like strands of cooked spaghetti, and the slightest movement sent waves of agony through him. Half his teeth were gone. He had the bravado of a movie hero, but this wasn't a movie. Rhino, his professional pride now wounded that this punk hadn't broken yet, reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of 10-penny nails. The moment Caleb saw the long, sharp points of steel, the color drained from his face. "What were you doing?" he stammered. "What am I doing?" Rhino sneered back. In a flash, he grabbed Caleb's hand and drove one of the nails straight through his thumb, pinning it to the concrete floor. The pain was instantaneous and absolute. Caleb's scream was a high-pitched, inhuman shriek, and his body began to convulse. When Rhino picked up a second nail, Caleb finally shattered. The smell of urine filled the air. I'll talk, he sobbed. "Please stop. You're going to kill me," he begged. I walked over and pressed my shoe onto his head, grinding his face into the filthy floor. "You should have talked when I asked nicely," I said. "When did it start?" I asked. "A year ago," he replied. "You've got balls sleeping with Lucas Hayes' wife," I said while staring down into his terrified eyes. "Mr. Hayes, it wasn't my fault. Olivia made me do it," he blubbered. "Olivia made you?" I asked. "Did she make you get her pregnant with your child so you could inherit my fortune?" Caleb was trembling uncontrollably. "Mr. Hayes, it was a moment of weakness. Please just let me go, I'm begging you." "It was Olivia, that bitch. She kept saying she hated this high society life and this arranged marriage. She said she wanted to fight for her destiny. I swear I never wanted to cross you." He was a sniveling, weeping mess. I laughed, the sound completely devoid of any warmth. "You think she'll be sad to hear you say that? She's on an operating table right now, because of you." Caleb's face twisted in horror. "Mr. Hayes, I'm innocent. Let me go. Please go after Olivia. It was all her idea." So this was the real him once the mask came off. His own life was all that mattered. I lifted his head by the hair, my eyes boring into his. I held his gaze for a long moment, and then a slow, cruel smile spread across my face. "You regret it now? Well, it's too late." My eyes fell on the corner of a phone sticking out of his pocket. "Unlock it," I said coldly. Caleb froze, his eyes wide with a new kind of terror. He refused to look at the phone, as if it contained a secret more damning than anything he could ever confess. "Unlock it," I roared, slapping him again. I grabbed his hand and forced his thumb onto the fingerprint scanner. The phone unlocked. Caleb slumped to the ground like a corpse. I opened iMessage. The top conversation was with a contact named My Everything. The chat log was a sewer of explicit messages and dozens of photos. They had rekindled their college flame a year ago. Beyond that, there were countless money transfers, 5,000 here and 10,000 there. It was all from Olivia to Caleb for his living expenses. She was using my money to fund her little boy toy. I scrolled through the messages, my rage building with every word. Then I found it, the last few texts. My Everything wrote, "Caleb, once the baby is born, he'll get his shares in Hayes Enterprises. Then we just need to arrange a little accident for Lucas, and the entire company will be ours." Caleb replied, "Olivia, are you sure about this? This is the Hayes family. His grandfather can make governors tremble. Can we really pull this off?" My Everything replied, "We have to. Miller Group is about to go under. I can't watch my grandfather's legacy turn to dust." My Everything added, "Besides, I'm not scared. Why are you? Lucas has no idea. She was as venomous as a viper. She wasn't just after my money. She wanted me dead. The last of my self-control snapped. I hurled the phone against the concrete wall, and it exploded into 1,000 pieces. I took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to cage the inferno burning inside me. "Son of a bitch," I muttered. I turned to Rhino and told him to cut off the man's hands, put him in a weighted bag, and throw him into Lake Michigan. Caleb's face contorted in sheer terror. He began crawling toward me, with his broken legs dragging uselessly behind him, banging his forehead on the ground. "Lucas Hayes, I was wrong. I was wrong, and I'll never do it again. Please spare my life. I'm begging for mercy." No one paid his desperate cries any attention. Two of my largest men grabbed him and dragged him behind a stack of rusted machinery. Just then, Leo rushed in with a pale face. He leaned in and spoke in a low voice. "Sir, we have a background on Caleb's family. His father is deceased, but he has a mother and a younger sister who just graduated from college. I have their numbers," he said, pausing as his expression hardened. "And sir, both of them work for Hayes Enterprises subsidiaries. The mother is a finance manager, and the sister is a procurement manager, a recent college graduate serving as a procurement manager. This had Olivia's fingerprints all over it. My own damn company has been infiltrated by this trash. Get a team from internal affairs on this immediately. Find every single person in this company with ties to the Millers. I want a full purge, and do not be gentle about it. I'd rather fire 10 loyal employees than miss one single traitor. And when we find them, sir?" Leo asked. I glanced toward Rhino. "Give the list to him. Fools! You don't poke the bear in its own den. You wanted to infiltrate my company? Fine. Miller Group is finished, and you can all go feed the fish." I looked at the phone numbers in my hand, those belonging to his mother and sister. An idea, cold and sharp, formed in my mind. "Wait, don't dump him in the lake just yet. Bring him back out here." A moment later, they dragged Caleb out. He was a broken, bleeding mess with his arms now hanging at unnatural angles. He was barely conscious. "Mr. Hayes," he gasped, "I was wrong. Spare me." I smiled and held the phone to his ear. "Call your mother and sister," I purred. "Get them over here. You do that, and I'll let you live to see the sunrise." Caleb stared at me, uncomprehending at first. Then the realization dawned on him, and he began to sob. "Mr. Hayes, my family has nothing to do with this. Kill me, do whatever you want of me, but please not them. My mother has worked hard her whole life, and my sister just graduated," he pleaded. "Nothing to do with it?" I sneered. "She had everything to do with getting a cushy executive job at my company, didn't she? You weren't worried about involving family then, were you?" Caleb had no answer because he knew I was right. Olivia had wanted to put his sister in the C-suite, but he'd cautiously suggested a manager role instead. It hadn't saved him. He hesitated for a moment. I grunted. "Rhino, the knife. Let's see if he can start a new life as a soprano." Rhino pulled a wicked-looking combat knife from his belt and let the blade glint under the dim factory lights, his eyes fixed on Caleb's crotch. A wave of cold dread washed over Caleb. "I'll do it, I'll call," he screamed. "But you have to keep your word, Mr. Hayes." "Of course," I replied. "But if you try any tricks, I'll make sure the three of you have a family reunion at the bottom of the lake." I held the phone to his ear and dialed his sister's number. A mature woman's voice answered. "Caleb, honey, what is it?" "Mom," he choked out, "get Chloe and come have dinner with me. I booked a table at Elenia." "Oh, wonderful. I have the keys to that new condo I bought for you." Perfect timing. Caleb instinctively asked where she got the money for a condo. She laughed lightly and said it was from the company. "Silly. Your mother is an old pro at cooking the books, and with Chloe in procurement, it's foolproof. Don't you worry. We have another big kickback coming next month. We're going to get Chloe a new Porsche." He started to say something, but then he saw my face. My face was a mask of thunderous rage. He swallowed and forced himself to continue. "Great. I'll send a car for you." After he hung up, Caleb's face was a study in despair. "Leo," I said, "get a couple of beds and bring them here. Stealing from my company, my money. The company my grandfather built for nothing. A new hire skimming enough for a condo in her first month. In 6 months, she'd have bled a whole division dry." The thought reignited my fury. I walked over and kicked Caleb a few more times for good measure. $1 million is more than most people see in a lifetime. Soon, 2 bare mattresses were placed on the grimy floor of the factory. Evening was falling, and the sky outside was streaked with orange and red. It was the end of a very long day, but the night was far from over. String him up again, I ordered, and gag him. I want him to have a good view of what's coming. Leo's scalp prickled. So this was how a Titan took his revenge. It was brutal and horrifying, but God, it was effective. He couldn't imagine what he would do if his own wife had betrayed him like this. She tried to steal his fortune, take his life, and infest his work with her parasitic family. He doubted he'd have the stomach for it. A silver Maybach soon pulled up outside. Inside, Caleb's mother and sister, Chloe, were excitedly discussing where they would go shopping after dinner. But as the car drove deeper into the desolate industrial park, a flicker of unease began to set in. They questioned the driver, but the stone-faced man in sunglasses didn't say a word. Before they knew what was happening, the car stopped, the doors were wrenched open, and they were dragged out like livestock. "Who are you? What are you doing? Let go of me, you're hurting my arm. You thugs. I'm calling the police. My son is the vice president of the Miller Group." They screamed. They struggled and fumbled for their phones, only to have them snatched away and smashed on the pavement. A moment later, they were bound and thrown onto the mattresses. Looking around at the decaying factory and the circle of menacing, muscular men, the reality of their situation finally crashed down on them. Who are you people?" The mother stammered with her voice trembling. "What do you want?" "My son is a VP. If it's money you want, I can give you $3 million. Just let us go." Chloe was curled into a ball, sobbing. "A VP, you say?" I drawled, pointing up at the figure hanging from the rafters. "You mean that one?" The mother squinted into the gloom. After a long moment, she recognized the battered, bloody figure, and a horrified scream tore from her throat. "Caleb." At the sound of her voice, Caleb stirred. Seeing his mother and sister, his face twisted in agony. "Mom, Chloe, run. Get out of here." "Run?" I chuckled. "Where exactly are they going to run to?" I walked slowly over to Chloe, tilting her chin up with my finger. "You behave yourselves, and I might consider letting you live." Chloe's fear suddenly morphed into fury. She lunged forward and tried to bite my hand. "Go to hell." She spat. Impressive, very defiant. "What are you all waiting for?" I roared at my men who had been watching with a mixture of awe and fear. "Get to work. There'll be a bonus in it for all of you." Their hesitation vanished, replaced by a grim eagerness. "We live to serve you, Mr. Hayes," they chorused. Caleb thrashed against his bonds, his muffled screams filled with rage and despair. "Hayes, you coward! Come after me! Leave them alone, you bastard! You demon! I'll see you in hell!" For hours later, I stepped out of the factory into the cool night air. Inside, the mother and daughter were broken, their eyes vacant like marionettes with their strings cut. "Tomorrow morning," I told Rhino, "put Caleb in the lake." From behind me, I heard Caleb's hoarse, desperate cry. "Lucas Hayes, you lied. You went back on your word." I turned and gave him a cold smile. "I said I'd let you live to see the sunrise. I never said anything about what would happen after." Caleb hung there, limp and defeated. "Sir, what about the 2 women?" Rhino asked. "Send them to Vinny's place over in Gary," I said. "Vinny ran operations you didn't read about in the papers." I had thought Chloe was some innocent girl caught in a crossfire, but the filth on her work computer told a different story. She wasn't a victim. To protect some future poor bastard from her, this was the only way. Ubiquined leu over. That townhouse in Lincoln Park, the one I bought for the marriage. Sell it, and everything of Olivia's inside. Throw in the lake. The thought of her and her poison made my stomach turn. "And the baby, has it been dealt with yet?" Leo shook his head. "I just spoke with the hospital. The attending physician says the patient is emotionally unstable and that forcing the procedure now could be dangerous." My eyes narrowed. Dangerous? And Stephen Miller, where is he? I asked. Hospital security saw him enter Olivia's room, but they haven't seen him leave. A cold dread washed over me. The old bastard was playing games. Fire that doctor immediately. Fly in a team from the Mayo Clinic. I want the procedure done tonight. And give me 50 men for my grandfather's Egyptian security detail. If that bastard child was born, the Hayes family would be a laughingstock. I couldn't believe Stephen Miller had the balls to defy me. Call the board. I want a full-spectrum corporate assault on the Miller Group. I want them bankrupt by sunrise. The Hayes family had dominated this state for a century. We weren't just old money, we were kingmakers. Did they really think we were a soft touch? Leaving the derelict factory behind, I headed for Lakeside Private. If this woman was going to be difficult, I'd be happy to give her a little push. The Hayes family name would not be tarnished on my watch. Leo spoke up tentatively. Mr. Hayes, should we inform your grandfather about this? I waved him off and said no. Why would I bother the old man with this kind of filth? If I needed my grandfather to clean up my messes, I might as well just end it all now. What would his old friends on a national stage think of him? About 30 minutes later, Leo's phone rang. It was the hospital. Sir, we found out what happened, he said. Olivia's attending physician was on the Miller payroll. If Rhino and his team hadn't arrived when they did, they would have already moved her to another facility. So, their infiltration of my world was deeper than I'd thought. A chill ran down my spine. If I hadn't found that report in my desk drawer, I'd still be in the dark, acting like a smiling fool. The venom of a woman and the scheming of a lesser man. When the two combine, the fallout is catastrophic. What about Stephen Miller? Any sign of him? I demanded. Leo shook his head and said he had vanished. The CEO of a major, if failing, corporation had simply disappeared. We arrived at the hospital. The top-floor VIP wing was already locked down by Rhino and dozens of Egyptian operators. The new medical team from the Mayo Clinic had arrived. They were so dedicated they'd even brought their own nurses. The message was that Lakeside Private, a Hayes-owned hospital, could no longer be trusted. The irony was suffocating. Inside her room, Olivia heard our footsteps. She scrambled to the glass door with her face pressed against it. When I entered, she fell to her knees, her eyes red and raw from crying. Lucas, I'm begging you, please spare him, she pleaded. The doctor told me if I do this, I might never be able to have children again. Please have mercy. I grabbed her chin with my fingers digging into her skin. Olivia, if you wanted to be a mother so badly, you should have married Caleb Vance. Why the hell did you drag me into it? I wasn't thinking straight, she whispered with her eyes cast down in shame, and the Miller Group was desperate. She looked up with a flicker of hope in her eyes. But I promise that after he's born, I'll disappear. We'll leave Chicago, and you'll never see me or hear from the Millers again. I laughed. The woman's audacity was breathtaking. For the sake of your maternal instincts, you're willing to drag the Hayes family name through the mud? Olivia, you have a lot of nerve. Just listen to my offer, she said frantically. My father is willing to sign over 50% of the Miller Group, and he'll give you a list of every Miller loyalist working inside Hayes Enterprises. I just stared at her. The Miller Group is already mine for the taking. I don't need you to give me what I already own. As for the traders in my company, I'll conduct my own house cleaning. And tell your father that if he doesn't show his face in the next hour, he'll regret what I do to what's left of his family. Olivia's eyes widened. She couldn't believe I could be so utterly ruthless, but she had no other cards to play. She fell to the floor and wrapped her arms around my legs, crying out, Lucas, I'm begging you. I shook her off and stepped away. The new medical team, who had been waiting for my signal, surged into the room. On the rooftop helipad, my private helicopter stood waiting. It was covered in cartoon stickers, a whimsical touch I'd planned as a surprise for Olivia once. Now, it just looked pathetic. The lead surgeon from the Mayo team approached me. Mr. Hayes, the procedure was successful, he said. A weight lifted from my chest. I felt empty. There was no thrill of victory and no satisfying sting of revenge. I felt only a profound, bone-deep weariness. Life in the gilded cage wasn't glamorous. It was a battlefield. The glittering surface hid a world of knives in the dark. If I hadn't destroyed Caleb Vance tonight, once they had hollowed out Hayes Enterprises from the inside, my end would have been far worse than his. Mr. Hayes, we still have no sign of Stephen Miller, Leo reported. Don't worry, he'll surface. Olivia is his only daughter, I said with a faint smile. Leo, get the legal team and draft an acquisition agreement. I want to buy the Miller Group for $1. Right away, sir, he replied. Just as I predicted, 2 hours later, Stephen Miller appeared at the hospital entrance, demanding to see me. The moment we were face to face, he cut to the chase. Lucas, you have Caleb, and the child is gone. I want you to let my daughter go. His voice was flat and devoid of emotion. She's the only family I have left, and I'm asking for your mercy, he said. I lit a cigarette, taking my time and letting the smoke cloud the air between us before I spoke. Olivia already made an offer of 50% of the company, but I wasn't satisfied. A flicker of something, maybe the last embers of pride, died in his eyes. He grit his teeth. Name your price. Lucas. Anything within my power, he said. I slid the freshly printed acquisition agreement across the table. He picked it up and his eyes scanned the document, then froze, fixated on the purchase price. $1. His face darkened and the words came out low and tight, squeezed from his throat. Lucas, this is robbery. I gave him a shameless smile. Old man, don't delude yourself. The Miller Group isn't the powerhouse of it. Without my capital injection, it would have been bankrupt 6 months ago. As it stands, it's already insolvent. Do you honestly think you're in any position to negotiate with me? He already knew. He had received the alerts that Hayes Enterprises was launching a coordinated attack on every one of his business interests. His teetering company was already drowning. There would be no rescue. He didn't dare ask what would happen to the Miller loyalists inside my company. He had to save himself. But at the thought of signing away his family's legacy and his grandfather's work, a heavy despair settled over him. It was a high-stakes gamble, and he had lost. Now it was time to pay the price. Stephen Miller covered his face with his hands, sitting in silence for a long time. Finally, he looked up, his voice a hoarse whisper. All right, I hope you'll be a man of your word and let me and my daughter leave Chicago. Of course, I said, smiling as I signed my name. When it was his turn, Stephen's hand trembled as he held the pen. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then scrawled his name. In that instant, it was as if he had aged 20 years. The lines on his face deepened, and his movement became slow and heavy. Can I take my daughter now? He asked with a hollow voice. I nodded. Leo, arrange a car, escort them to the state line. Half an hour later, the hostile takeover of the Miller Group was in full swing across all departments. I called Rhino into my office. I want you to tail the Millers, I said. Be discreet. I made a sharp cutting motion across my throat. Rhino understood immediately. He nodded and left the room. As the head of the Hayes family, I knew a fundamental truth better than anything. You cut the weed out by the root. If I let them go now, in 10 years, they might come back to burn my entire world. There is no defense against an enemy you willingly set free. Olivia, don't blame me. You're the one who made the wrong choice. Some mistakes can't be unmade. They can only be paid for. Mr. Hayes, Leo said as he entered holding a thick file. Internal Affairs has finished their sweep. They found everyone. This is the list, he said, handing me a document that was dozens of pages long. Give it to Rhino, I said with a sigh while closing my eyes. A few days later, I was in my office dealing with the last of the Miller Group integration of my grandfather's home. Lucas, my boy, I found a perfect girl for you, he said. She's from the Harrison family, an absolute sweetheart. Impeccable family and a wonderful girl. Why don't you make some time in your schedule so we can get you two married? A shiver went down my spine. Grandfather, I said while rubbing my fingers, no fishing or play around at all. My love life is the last thing you need to worry about. I hung up the phone and leaned back in my chair as the exhaustion of the past week finally began to settle in. Across these narratives, the character of Lucas serves as a masterclass in the cold restoration of power against the tides of betrayal and manipulation. Whether facing a transmigrated romance, corporate infidelity, or a billion-dollar paternity fraud, Lucas systematically dismantles the schemes of unfaithful partners and their opportunistic interlopers through a blend of professional excellence and ruthless calculation. By shedding the skin of a heartbroken victim to become an uncompromising predator, he purges his empire of parasites safeguards his legacy with clinical precision. Ultimately, his journey underscores a chilling truth. In an environment where kindness is weaponized and loyalty is a commodity, true survival requires the absolute rejection of sentimentality in favor of unshakable dominance and the total elimination of those who mistake his silence for weakness.